Hi there. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Maura Ginty, Interim CMO at Lean Data, a software platform that orchestrates every person, process, and play that you need to close deals faster and drive more revenue. We also recently launched some scheduling software, so it's tip to spear everything you need to get the leads where they need to go. I'm here today with Udi Lettergore and Eric Charles. They are both chief evangelists and former CMOs. So we've got a lot to talk about today. It's a really important era for evangelism, and it's part of some key digital marketing strategies and overall marketing strategies that we're seeing working these days. Eric brings with us 3 decades of experience in marketing and consulting. He went from Canon, Sun Microsystems, and Apple to Exactly, where he's led marketing for a long time and is now the chief evangelist. He also has a book that he will talk about in a little bit. It is all about unicorns. Surprise. Udi Lettergore joins us from Gong. He's been there for quite some time as well. He was the first marketer at Gong. He's been there for a while and recently wrote a book called The 50 Secrets of Trade Show Success. So we're talking today about harmonizing brand beats. We're going to talk a bit about what it's like to make this switch from CMO to evangelists. And we're going to start off with talking through our favorite part of the day. So Udi and Eric, what makes you happiest in the morning?
Go ahead, Eric.
A cup of extremely bitter, dark coffee, as I was like say, I start the day off dark. And I'll also admit, walking an extremely obnoxious corgi who wants to yell at the entire world, no matter where we're going. I kick it off then, and while I'm on that walk, like everybody, my face is in my phone, and I'm hitting delete and delete and delete and just killing out all of the random spam emails that have rolled in while I've been asleep.
I have 3 kids, ages 8 to 10. So if they're not trying to kill each other in the morning, everything else is a bonus. I don't ask for much. But yes, I also start with a very small espresso, a very strong and small espresso. That's the only thing I have for breakfast. And then I move on to the fun ritual of deleting emails.
Yes, I do the same. I have a very gigantic cup of tea that you can still see here. But breakfast of champions, deleting all the emails. And over the years, what is bothering you most about these emails?
Well, I feel like everybody, has the same tip sheet. Send the email at X o'clock, because you can almost time the drop into your inbox. And because I've had global responsibilities, so different databases have me tagged in California, which is my home, London, where I do a lot of work, Tokyo, where I spent the last year, and actually New York, where I've done a fair amount of speaking. So I can almost see the hour of like, if we send them the email at 8:45 a.m. of whatever time zone they think I'm in, we'll drop it all then. And it's like, you do realize you're coming in with everybody else. And so I will just sit there and, so I feel bad for the automation systems and some marketing specialist who is building these cadences in various automation platforms and saying, we're sending these out. And, and I'm just clicking the boxes and deleting so many of them. Although occasionally I'll look at the most atrocious ones, I will admit. And if they're really bad, I will share them as thou shalt not do this to my team. But I'll also look at the ones that are really, really good and share them out. It's like, hey, this looks interesting. We should consider this pattern. In neither case am I actually following up to buy the product, because the data set is so old. They're sending it to me. I'm the chief evangelist, and they're trying to ask me if I'd like to, for example, my favorite today was, it looks like you're not interested in hiring additional IT resources. No, nothing in my job says I hire for IT.
Yeah. I delete them. I mean, if first of all, they're just too darn long. Like, ain't nobody got time for that. People just write me scrolls and scrolls of emails as if like I just completely cleared my morning to read your cold email. No, I don't. And if it's got more than one link in it, it's probably someone who doesn't know what I want. So they're sending me a dozen links, and maybe there's something there I'll find interesting, as if I have the time to browse or click any of those. I think the best prospecting emails that I get are extremely short, because they actually understand what an executive's lives and days look like. We're very, very busy. Get to the damn point. Don't ask me about my health and my family if we've never met. I'm not going to share that with you. Just get to the darn point. Don't waste that real estate on, I hope you're well. And I saw you sneezed 4 months ago on LinkedIn. Oh, come on, people, just get to the point. Usually they'll have like one sentence that is all I need to know that they know me. And it's really important context because they either hit on a challenge that I actually shared publicly or privately that they know I have, or they mention a mutual connection that not just someone random that we both follow on LinkedIn. Oh, I see you also breathe oxygen. Here's what I want to sell you. No, like tell me someone that we both personally know that mentioned me in a conversation and said so-and-so, and that's why you thought I'd be interested in that. That would be interesting.
Right. Tell me about the problem I'm trying to solve, right?
Yeah. Well, don't give me the trivia. That's lazy personalization. It's not personalization.
Well, I've always said, if you're going to, before you ask for 15 minutes of my time, can you please spend at least 5 minutes? My LinkedIn profile is open. I mean, you can find my Facebook profile. I mean, it's just, I gave up on privacy a long time ago, especially when you're doing the job I do. It's like, it's gone. So come on, chase it down. And it's fun. So my kids are 20 and 28. My 28-year-old runs a team of 2 SDRs plus is run sales, and then it has a CS underneath him at a very small startup. And so, I am always like telling him, dude, if you're making these calls, please tell me you're actually looking them up. And so, he goes through a process of actually trying to track down something about these people and sending them notes to at least, like you say, pretend that you care.
Plus, it's important to know. Again?
Sorry, go ahead. Udi, go ahead.
I just wanted to say we actually we dug up the data in Gong, and we found that SDRs who send their calendar link asking for the 15 minutes in the first cold email are the least likely to get it, compared to someone who asks a much softer commit, which is this worth a short chat? Or are you interested in learning more? And by making it a smaller commitment, people are much more likely to respond. So I think calendar links are great, but they are often abused because you're sending me a calendar link before I agree to a date. It's like me trying to hit up on someone and telling them which restaurant we're going to meet our first date. She hasn't even agreed, or he hasn't even agreed to seeing me at all. Why would we agree on a restaurant now? No, just get some interest first.
It's true. And the number of times that I get that link, and then if I do respond and I don't get to the right person, I have to say, I'm furious that I even responded to begin with. So you've got to make sure that it's also getting along the right path too, because if you do respond to one of them, you feel like such an idiot, like if they don't handle the lead well. Yeah. But the other thing that we were comparing before this call was like, check your list. Like, you should know that my example was, you should know I'm already a customer. Like, I'm happy you're reaching out to me as a prospect, but I'm already a customer. Any last favorites on that between the two of you before we move on to other?
Or a direct competitor, and you're trying to sell me a product that directly competes with the one that we sell. I mean, come on, trying to convince me, look at one of our other products, that's fine. I mean, I laugh. We've got Incent, our ICM tool, is on the Oracle Cloud. Now, Oracle also sells an ICM tool, but Oracle's huge. So I have no problem doing business with Oracle and competing with Oracle. And I have a great relationship with the cloud side of the house and the analytics side of the house. But like the direct inbounds, I feel sorry. It's like you're hurting your own analytics of your numbers if you're sending it directly to me. When, if I went into Chris and said, hey, yeah, I was thinking we would buy this piece of software. What do you think? I mean, that would be a great last day at work of all times.
I think one of the funnier one that I got is from one of the top leading email automation platforms that we all know, who shall remain unnamed, that literally sent me a cold email where all the fields were messed up, and it was like, dear first name and last name, as you're the CMO at company name, we wanted to show you our email automation. I'm like, dudes, like, this is the one thing you should know how to do. But after we had a good laugh at everyone's expense, it is important to say that every single one of us has messed up. I know I have multiple times. I've sent an email in German to a French audience. I've sent an email about SAP to an Oracle audience. I've done it all. So we get to have a little fun, but we're all human beings. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
I would never publicly shame any of those people for
No.
making an honest mistake.
Yeah.
Laziness is not an honest mistake. Laziness is not doing your best. But messing up a field is an honest mistake.
It happens. No, I actually agree with you. I don't like to see the shaming on LinkedIn. It's more of an internal, okay, let's just try not to make that mistake.
It's true. And this, I think we also talked about where the laziest of lazinesses comes out is when it's around an event, because there are so many things that you have to get right for events. I'm still slightly terrified of events. I have to like squeeze in a thank you to Alison Murdoch for the work she did for OpStars, Hannah internally, and a whole bunch of folks, Matt and CX and the Demand Jane, everybody tackled it. But it is really easy to get lazy about events because there's just so much to do. And that's where you see like this sudden surge around like big San Francisco events for like really terrible, very similar emails. So I'm curious. We talked a little about a lot of this. What are the main things you would want to see people improve around, speaking of this consistency, brand consistency, what would you want to see improve around email, around ROI, around messages, around content, particularly with events?
Yeah, I think many companies, again, we call it lazy, but in all honesty, I mean, most people in the profession are not lazy. They're just overwhelmed and they've got so much to do and I think most people try to do too much, which is why they end up spreading themselves so thinly that they can't do anything right or as deeply and well as they wish to. So that's maybe one point in time where you pause and say, well, maybe if I cut half the things that I don't absolutely have to do that are not making an impact anyway, just because we've always been doing them doesn't mean we have to keep doing them. But let's like focus on what's the big idea for this event? Why are people going to stop at my booth? Why are they going to take action after visiting my booth? And really break that down. So I've actually written, as you mentioned, Maura, I wrote a book a few years ago called The 50 Secrets of Trade Show Success, where I really break down the pre-show, the at show and the post-show campaigns and everything from setting up the post-show emails before you go out to the show. I can't stress how important this is, because what happens is most people end up just making it by their skin of their teeth to the show. And they're like, okay, once we get back, we're going to go out after the last night, all get drunk. And then the next day we're probably traveling. And then 2 days later, we start cleaning up the leads. And by the time you think of what follow-up email we should send them, it's a week after the event. Those leads have gone completely bone cold. They have no idea who you are. They don't remember stopping at your booth. And the right time for sending out that email is the following business day at around 8 a.m. in the morning. And to do that, you really have to set up that entire campaign, create the content piece if you need to, and set up the email and everything before you leave for the show, because you're not going to have time to do this at the show. And then have your marketing ops people block their calendar for the afternoon on the last day of the show to do all that lead cleanup so that tomorrow morning it can go out. The only way to do that is plan that ahead and make that part of your checklist and cadence of how you manage a show. And then you can actually send out an email the following day with some personalization saying, hey, it was great seeing you at our booth. I hope your kids enjoyed the stuffed animal you took. And here's the piece of content I told you about. I thought you'd be interested in that. That's an effective follow-up that we just don't see enough people doing.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think some of that also comes from, and I've seen this, companies that go to an event and they don't have a strategy. They don't know, or they've got a shotgun strategy. It's like, okay, look, I'm going to have customer success over in this corner of the booth because we're going to have a lot of our current customers going to stop by. Now, the SMB team can close within the quarter. So we want to be doing full-on closing demos to any SMB prospect that walks up to the booth. Hold it. The commercial folks tend to close 3 to 4 months later in enterprise software. So for those, we need to get them going and get more persona ideas and, almost do a pre-bant. And enterprise, well, if enterprise actually makes the mistake of making eye contact, we've got to find some way of separating them out, taking them to a high-priced dinner so that we can get that deep relationship so that we're part of the RFP. And that's, and this is where, and I sometimes feel it's the sales marketing conflict of marketing's job, build pipeline, sales job, close. When is the event? It's a great one. OpStars was early this year, because OpStars follows the Dreamforce schedule. And so, oh, great. We've got it in September. So this is a pipeline building event. But when Dreamforce drops in, say, November, for a lot of companies, they flip the switch and it becomes a closing event. They're trying to bring in any prospect that comes and they're more focused on the prospects. And then Q1 rolls around. They're like, where's the pipeline? I thought we did a big event just a couple months ago. We put all of our focus on closing and forgot to actually build something new. And I think that's part of that pre-plan, and it's probably one of the 50 secrets in that book. And
yeah, I mean, literally the book starts with what is the goal of your event. If you don't have one big goal, you can't have 14. You can have one, maybe a secondary one as well. But if you've got 6 goals, there's just no way you're going to hit them. So what is the one goal that you're optimizing for, and how are you building the entire booth experience, the attendee experience around that goal? If you want to have customer meetings, that's one goal, but then don't expect to come back with pipeline. If you want to maximize pipeline, then how about a friendly competition between all the SDRs at the booth who scans more leads, but don't expect to close many deals there that day? It's just competing goals, and you can't have it all. You've got to pick one and maybe a secondary one if you actually want to achieve it, and then optimize everything around that.
That's an interesting. I like that, and one of the things I teach. I teach classes on incentive design at the university level. Is any good sales comp plan, and even a marketing comp plan, or anybody's got a variable comp plan, you can't have more than 3 measures.
Correct.
And I've been able to dig. We've got a glorious data set, and I've been able to dig through it for years. It's part of the why I have so much fun. So I get to play with, put my academic nerd hat on. And we found that as soon as you get past like 3 measures, and really 2.5, we jokingly 2.5 measures, it's statistics. Don't worry about it. You can watch achievement, if anything, starts dropping. And you just have to focus. And given the disco theme, one of my favorite things is it goes back to, and if anybody who's distrusting that, it's the old, why do you turn down the radio when you're trying to find an address? It's a natural reaction. So they did an MRI study. They put people in the MRI machine and they played music and they had them concentrate on things. And they found that the brain listening to the music kept the brain from being able to process other information.
100%. I cannot work with music. I'm one of those people. It's also because I have a background in music. I compose and arrange. I just start breaking it down. Oh, look what the bass line is doing there. And there was a nice drum fill over there. I cannot do anything else while I'm listening to music.
Yeah. And so if you go into it,
maybe being the only exception, because I can do that on sort of auto mode, autopilot. But I cannot do any sort of thinking when I'm listening to music.
Yeah. I can't do podcasts when I'm driving. I tune them out because I focus.
Really?
I completely lose all. I cannot listen to them. I'm like, hold it. I feel like I'm back as an undergrad, on an 8 a.m. class. I've been here for 30 minutes and I haven't heard a thing. But yeah, so I agree. If you go in with 15 goals for an event, you're not going to hit any of them.
Yeah, you're really doing 0. And I have to say, your companies are so lucky to have these evangelists who see the whole marketing picture as part of events. We know that events are really coming back as a strong channel right now. They're probably one of the more successful ones. And you're really disco stars here because you see the whole picture. I was mentioning earlier, I'm so used to seeing technical evangelists with software products where it's Kubernetes or something like that, and or some sort of developer sale where they just don't trust marketing. And having that knowledge of how marketing works to make the event more effective, that's so important because you want to get evangelists out the door to events. You're speaking all the time. I'm curious, like how many events do you see per year, and what do you think about the priority of events as a channel right now?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think Udi's got more than I do. I think I'm on 6 or 7 for the year so far right now. And another set of and I've got 2 more sets of plane tickets scheduled for the upcoming couple of weeks. I think the challenge that events are facing right now is that first year of the lockdown, everybody did great. I mean, you can look at the numbers, you can look at the revenue numbers and everything. Oh, and an attitude of virtual is all we need. Events are really expensive. ROI matters. Why would I spend $10,000, let's just say just a chunk of $10,000. If I had $10,000, what would you do with it? Would you expand on an event? Would you do another event if it was a cheap event? Would you take 3, or would you put $10,000 into doing X numbers of webinars or content syndication plays or something like that? And I believe that a lot of companies fell into a trap there for a bit. And now they're suddenly realizing, hold it, there's something we are missing by not being at these events. And it's not just the scans and it's not just the meetings. It's also I was asked, once I was asked, what would happen if we didn't go to Dreamforce? And my response was, at minimum, our competition would use that as a club against us in every single sales cycle. I mean, there we go. I mean, I do a specialty show on sales comp every year. And the same question came up. What would happen if we skipped this show? I said, a third of our customers are there and our competition's there, and we would lose. Now, you might not feel the pain for 6 to 9 months, but it would kill you. So
Yeah.
I think events are critical. I think they have to be done smart. They have to be done with a plan. But you're fighting. We are in a rule of 40 in the SaaS software side of the world now, which is people want just revenue growth and profitability. There's a stronger and stronger push for profitability from all of our investors. I know I'm not alone in this. And that was, you mentioned at the beginning of the book, The Unicorn Fallacy. It's a book our CEO Chris Cabrera has got coming out here in November, and it's on the don't go with growth at any costs. You can find the link in the follow-up to this, but it's more important to think about, if you're doing an event, you're justifying a much larger chunk of a marketing budget. But it's not just a marketing budget, it's a company budget. I feel like events are more than just marketing. It's a sales activity, it's a marketing activity, and it's a corporate valuation activity, because it's
also a customer event. Like I think it's a really important place to reconnect with customers. Sorry,
there's several ways of approaching events, especially when you're on a budget. I'll give you a few examples to kind of open up people's minds that there's more than one way of skinning this cat. So here's one of the lowest cost ways that we're recording this webinar, as I'm literally one day after travel back from an event and right after I'm leaving for another event. Gong is not investing any money in these events. I've got, you mentioned, Eric, 7 events this year. I've got 7 events this month alone, and those are the in-person ones. I've got a larger number of virtual events. We're not investing a dime in any of these events. They are all flying me out to speak because we have positioned ourselves as thought leaders, and many of these events don't allow any vendors in the room. I'm speaking mostly this month at private equity and VC events where they get their own portfolio companies together. It's not a open to the public sort of event. You can't buy a ticket. You've got to be a portfolio company of these VCs and PEs, and they are sneaking me as one of the single vendors into the room to share my thought leadership, either about Gong's marketing journey, which I led in the last 7 years, or about what Gong actually does, which is how AI is changing sales and how Gong is positioned as a leader there. Now, imagine getting that sort of attention where people have their guards down because they're not here to listen to a sales pitch. I was invited as a VIP guest speaker, and I get them in a room for an hour, and I get to talk about whatever I want to, as long as it's providing value to them and it's not a sales pitch, and there's no other vendors competing against me. So that's one way. You could arguably say the most cost effective one, because the only thing Gong is investing is my time, which now that I'm full-time evangelist, I have the time to do this, like you do, Eric. So that's one way of going about it. But if we go back to the more traditional trade shows for a minute, I'll say the 2 ways that I look at it from a financial investment point of view there. One, if we are kind of forced to sponsor the event because our competition and customers are going to be there, then let's find a way to maximize ROI. And that means designing the whole attendee experience to get people to line up at the booth, literally line up at the booth to participate in whatever activity we have there. And I've got plenty of sort of examples, both in my book and in videos you can find on YouTube. One of the things that we did very successfully many times is create some sort of game experience at the booth, either some sort of dart game, or if we're in Las Vegas, we might rent a real slot machine for people to pull and actually win prizes. And everybody enjoys that. And the games are always sort of very inclusive. So we're not going to take something that needs a lot of physical force, because that kind of excludes some people. But that's the type of thing that we can do to really maximize attendance and excitement around our booth, while others are just standing there, looking at their phones, waiting for people to come in. Our team is being proactive and playful and bringing people in to play a game. And then the other type of approach to those events is, let's talk about Dreamforce for a moment. Dreamforce is a great event if you can afford a meaningful presence there. A meaningful presence at Dreamforce is well into the 7 figures. The big companies, like some of those that you mentioned, I'm sure you know, Eric, they pay millions of dollars to set up a big booth and have a presence. I don't have that sort of budget. And so in the 7 years I've been managing marketing at Gong, I've never sponsor Dreamforce, I always found a way to hack my way into getting some of that traffic and mind share. So one of the years we did a nice out of home campaign that cost me a tiny fraction of what it would cost me to get a booth. But I took over the main train stations like Montgomery Station here in San Francisco,
Yeah.
where everyone coming to the conference through that station saw Gong
Yep.
billboards all over the train station. Another
Yep.
thing we did is we rented 20 rideshare cars, Uber and Lyft cars, and wrapped them in our branding, again, for a tiny fraction of what it would cost me to get a booth. And I paid them extra to swarm around the Moscone Center where Dreamforce was happening, picking up and dropping off attendees. So there's always interesting ways to think about it. You don't have to just look at that sponsorship brochure and go, oh, darn, I guess we either can't do this or we have to put $3 million on a booth. There's always an interesting way to hack your way in there.
I do want to back up. You had a really good quick comment in there. When you talk, you're not pitching, you're educating.
Mhm.
And that, I think, because I had some fun at Dreamforce. Actually, my best attended talk was one that I talked about some research that we've sponsored. I've got several universities I partner with, and it was a summary of academic research on the state of sales for teams. And I talked about gender pay in sales and something we've been tracking for over a decade now in our data set of like the gap between men and women. Because when we first started, I said women, surely sales has got to be the one place where gender parity is closer since it's paid for performance. I was wrong, but if you don't have a hypothesis, you can't do a test. And so we've been following that, but we also talked about what's a good leaderboard look like. We talked about what's the change in inside sales versus field sales. And each one of those, and I've got like 5 new projects, and I just present, it's just office hours. I mean, that's my internal code for it is like, what's your office hours, next office hours talk of just here's some knowledge to have. You'll see the X behind me. The exactly X will be on a slide. That's all I need. That's all I need.
I'm curious about that though. Like, I love that you both think about this in such great detail and sort of in the multiple level 3D dimension of it. How do you look at you started to go down this road, but I'd love to hear some examples of where you've changed and tailored your activity or the content or the office hours talk track based on whether it's, a big Gartner event or a major vendor thing like Salesforce, or if it's something that's really small, maybe it's just like a little like 100 or 50 person event that's just in the UK or is very regional. How do you change your talk track there depending on the audience?
I'll change how the knowledge is presented. I'm laughing like Dreamforce because I did do talks at Dreamforce in the theater. And if you want to be noticed in the theater, you've got to have some disco going because people are walking by. And they're now doing the silent disco at Dreamforce this year, where they put headphones on everybody. And so that's how they could hear the talk. So nobody can stand at the back of the room and listen, which I actually disagree with. I understood why they did it to try and reduce the cacophony on the floor, but I actually think you lose some of the foot traffic that might stop and go, hold it, this is interesting. I always like the good talk where there's like X people sitting in front of you, but Y people are all clustered around. They don't want to show that commitment to come in and sit down, but they want to keep listening. So that's one of them. You can watch people tune out the longer you spend on here's about exactly, or here's what this product does or anything like that. No, they want to learn something. If they want a demo, they'll go to the booth, they'll go to the website. You probably have a click here, give up a little information, and we'll let you watch a demo video. A third of them are on YouTube anyway, if you know how to dig. So it's like, let's get you interested in the knowledge. And then, it'll play a little different depending on the room. I mean, if you're in the UK, just remember different terms are used for different things. That's what I always laugh about. I mean,
replace all your Z's with S's and you're good.
Z's and S's. For me, I have to practice saying remuneration. And so if you're sitting next to me on a flight from Southern California to London, I'll be sitting there going remuneration. Because once, and only because years ago I stood up on stage and I said remuneration. And I was like, oh, you're going to just renumber us all? What is this? I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, it's just not a term we use in America. So
I've noticed when the larger the room is, the more formal of a presentation they're expecting and the less interactive I can expect it to be. I recently gave a talk in Chicago at the AAISP summit and there were 700 sales leaders in the room. So I did a 20-minute presentation, and you needed the polished slides and everything for that. But I got back yesterday from presenting to maybe 40 people in a room, and they're only because they insisted, I brought with me literally 4 slides as a backdrop. But it was a 1-hour ask me anything sort of session, and I think they got more value out of it, and I definitely enjoyed it more because we were chatting just like the three of us are doing right now. It was very approachable, very conversational, and people don't like being talked to. And Maura, you mentioned the in-person events are coming back, and it's not just for the lead gen. I think the biggest reason people are going out to in-person events now is for the interaction with their peers and with the organizers / vendors, etc. But they don't want to sit there. They didn't get dressed, put pants on, and come to a conference. I'm not wearing pants, by the way. To come to a conference for 20 minutes to watch PowerPoint and be killed by PowerPoint slides. That's not what they want. That's not the experience. The bar for what has to be in the event is just so much higher now, and they want an interactive experience. They want active networking time.
Or read me PowerPoint. I can read faster than you can speak. Please.
100%. If everything you have to say is on a PowerPoint, just send it as an email. You don't need
exactly.
I did a show. I did a tour 1 year, and it was great, city to city, because first I got the feeling for different audiences. In New York, nobody would ask questions, but they would all come up and ask afterwards. Whereas in LA, someone would shout out from the back of the room and interrupt me. And it was,
because New Yorkers, they already know everything. Why would they have questions?
It was the exact same talk. But the best location, I mean, my co-presenter said, and he told me this, and he still brings it up. He's like, was when they broke the projector. So he did his presentation. I walk up, projector dies. And I can't. So I just delivered my entire talk without a single slide. And he later told me, he says, it was your smoothest, cleanest, and best one, because you already knew what you're going to talk about. You don't need any of those slides. Yeah. And I knew enough of my numbers that I was quoting. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And here's the percentage I see. And here's this, 3 to 8% number, or whatever it was. And I just delivered a talk. And I think it'd be a great challenge for anybody who wants to play the evangelist game. How long can you extemporaneously speak on a subject that matters to your audience in your industry?
Oh, that's true. That's a really good one. That is a great contest. Yeah, I remember when I was on the speaker circuit, I was really nervous at first. So I'd have an outline, and then by the end of it, probably like 5 or 10 years later, I just had it down to like the numbers I didn't want to get wrong, because like you don't want to like throw out the wrong percentage of like conversion to opportunity for the standards right now. And like you want, like the things that you want to share sometimes rely on that type of information.
I would have a single Post-it note with like, I got it down to like 4 or 5, and I just dropped that on the podium. But I can't sit still on a stage. They're like, do you want a mic or a lav? I'm like, give me a lav, because I'm going to pace and then tape the stage so I don't blow the speakers, by the way.
I remember we actually did a game once between a group like this, and we all said, we had a Post-it note. It was like, fit this word into your talk somehow. And I got hoop skirt and chartreuse. So there's all kinds of things you can do to rise up to the extemporaneous challenge. But one thing that you touched on there that I think is really important is like, why read something that's on the screen? And I think there's an importance to that in picking how you're talking to a specific audience. And how do you carry that through? Because one of the main things with content strategy right now is figuring out how to write it once and repurpose it, right? Like you want to be able to have that backbone. And like you said, when you're talking to the UK, you have to figure out remuneration, throw that in there. But you've got to also be able to like, it might be 90% the same, but there's a difference in vocabulary that has to be respected. So I'm curious how you look at all of this and how you think through your approach when you're moving this fast and talking to this many people. How do you not lose that information that someone found valuable? How do you turn a talk into something that's in written format, in the right written format, or into a podcast or a video? How do you think through repurposing and fitting into all the different channels, all this great value that you're trying to provide to your audience?
I do a couple of things. First, I think a prerequisite is like, you really need to know your shit. And Eric touched on that earlier. If you're selling to engineers, you should probably be an engineer, or at least go halfway there. If you're selling to marketers, you probably should have done some marketing or really understand their world. People have a great bullshit meter today. And if you're out there reading off your marketing materials without understanding the lingo, they're going to read right through you. It's not going to work. So I think people in our position, they really have to know what they're talking about. And it's better to send someone who really knows what they're talking about, even if they're not the most polished speaker in the world, than sending someone who's going to perfectly recite something that was written for him, but he doesn't understand what they're reading. They won't be able to answer questions. Ideally, you want both, right? You want someone who's also a great speaker. And I think a lot of the people who make it to our roles are kind of a great combination of both. You actually know what you're talking about, and you can quickly learn new things you need to talk about because you understand the domain. You've been working in it for years. And you also clearly enjoy being a public speaker, getting dressed up and doing this sort of thing. So that's the ideal. And I've seen companies, get it wrong, where they take someone because they're an executive or someone important or the head of product or even the CEO. But if they're not the best speaker, they're not going to, or they don't even fully understand the domain they're in, they're not going to give a great talk. So why would you do that just because you're trying to stroke their ego? That's not a good enough reason to do that. So yeah, I'll stop there. Eric, let you.
No, I agree. If you stand up and start talking about integrations and mention REST APIs because you've skimmed it, and then someone asks you, how about this? And you blank, you're toast. Now, some of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I was a sales engineer very early in my career was, it's okay to say you don't know, and you'll get back to them and take notes. And that was hard for me. Admitting I didn't know something.
It is hard.
That overcoming that arrogance is huge. On the slides, I have to say, for the evangelist title, I feel remiss if we do not, or if I don't mention Guy Kawasaki, who's the first person ever to up with the title of evangelist when he was hired by Apple to convince corporations, and more importantly, B2B software developers, to develop software for the Macintosh so that Apple could sell early Macs to companies. And met him a couple times, and he made comments of like, he was the first one who ever said, take the average age of the room, divide in half, and that's the smallest font size you're allowed to have on the screen. And I followed that one all the time.
Love that. He's now at Canva. He's been there for almost 10 years now.
Yeah. And then the next one that I like is, do you want them to listen to you? Do you want them to look at your slides?
They probably can't do both.
Yep. And that's a key one. And I have I've been trying to get to the point of images, but if I have data is the one place where I violate any rules. I was putting up the full statistical tables for some analysis we did recently. Why? It was background noise. I'll freely admit it was proving this is not a hack job. We actually did full proper research onto this question of, how much information should you share on a leaderboard kind of a thing. And at the same time, you always know you've got some good stuff in there when people are holding up their phones to take pictures, no matter how many times you tell them that they're going to get a copy of the deck in PDF, as soon as the event sends it to them. But, you've got it, but then you can just leave that there. And there's been times I've talked to our sales team even about, I'm like, hey, imagine if you just took this one slide and that's the only thing you had up on the screen the whole time you were talking. I mean, I don't even like the thank you slides sometimes. Any questions? Like, no, leave up the one slide that maybe summarizes everything. And once you get to that, then why did you need the deck? Couldn't you just have that slide behind you and just talk to it? And I can think that can be really effective.
100%. I'll try to make the last slide, instead of a thank you, either a QR code to the next thing I want them to do, either go to a dedicated landing page or connect with me on LinkedIn or download a piece of content. I'll make good use of it. And I will tell people, this is the time to pull out your cameras. And surprisingly, they actually do it.
Yeah. I want to take that notion of like, what's the next step? And a lot of times that is to get to the demo, whether it's a demo video or whether it's scheduling a demo with someone. We talked a little bit before about how impactful it was to have a past life as an engineer, and to start out in some of these roles so early that that product in and out. And as the company gets bigger, it becomes a concern. Like, how is sales talking about the product? How is the BDR talking about the product? And does that match everyone's original intent? And more importantly, what does the user care about? What does the buyer care about? So I'm curious, how do you, in your evangelist hat, because I'm sure you're asked to demo the video all the time on the spot, or you're trying to think through, like, what is the audience first version of that? What advice do you have for folks who are trying to take these teaching moments and turn them into an education about the product? through a demo specifically?
So, I'm a bit spoiled because I work for Gong, and at Gong we like to say we drink our own champagne. It's I think, tastier version of eating your own dog food. So we drink our own champagne, and we use Gong very heavily within marketing as well. And so, in the case of the demo and the whole sort of sales deck, what we do is every time we roll out new messaging or a new talk track, could be around a product launch or something in the market has changed or in the competitive landscape has changed. We use Gong in two important ways that are related to your question, Maura. One is we use it to track who's actually using the new talk track, because every marketer and sales leader or enablement leader I've talked to suffers from the same anxiety. We just rolled out a new polished deck. Everyone applauded and they go back to their desk, and I have no idea who's using it. And I was literally talking to a CMO the other night at dinner, and she was saying, yeah, I kind of creep up on them to see what they're showing on their demos, or I'll ask them over coffee, so what do you think about the new deck? And they're like, oh yeah, it's very nice. And I don't know, is that a good, is that a bad? Are they using it? I'm not getting feedback. And so using Gong actually reads the slides, so you know which slides they're using, and it listens to the talk track. So even if they're not using the slides, as many of us do, we know that they're using the new deck or they're not, the new talk track or not. And then the holy grail of, I think, understanding the efficacy of messaging, is it better or worse than the last type of messaging that we have? Gong can do that for you as well, because if I know that Gong tells me that Maura is using the new messaging and Eric is not, and Maura is selling at a 30% higher win rate than Eric, sorry to throw you under the bus, Eric, then I can come with that to their leader and say, hey, maybe it's time to coach Eric on the new deck, because he's missing out on this higher win rate that Maura is already realizing, because it's correlated with her using the new deck. Now, you might say Maura was always the better salesperson. Sorry, Eric. I'm reversing the bus over you now again.
Man, that knife is going deep.
It's okay. Maura just wants the equity.
Maybe it's a Maura thing, but if you look at this at the team level, so now Maura has a team of 20, and on average, her team has a 30% higher win rate than Eric's team of 20, then we know that's statistically significant correlation, showing that because Maura's team is using the new deck, that must mean that that's got something to do with their higher win rate. So yeah, that's how we use Gong internally to figure out what's working, what's not. And I can tell you, we didn't always get it right. As anyone in product marketing knows, crafting messaging is some part craft, some art, some science. And sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. Wouldn't you like to know, like in real time, what's working and what's not, and not waiting 6 months to see the lagging indicators of lower win rates come in, and then trying to reverse engineer to see, oh, was she using the old deck or the new deck? Who knows?
Yeah, and Eric, I'd love to hear about your experience with this, because ICM is no light product. There's a lot of technical detail in this, and you're selling to a lot of very technical folks. So I'm curious how you've seen some of the same things and maybe some different things than what you described.
So my favorite thing because I teach in our enablement program for new onboarding reps, and I always tell them, you've got a huge advantage. You're selling something you personally care about. An engine that does a better job of calculating and communicating your commissions right back to you, what matters and how it goes. And I always tell the sales team, embrace your role, embrace the fact that you're a sales rep selling a product that matters to sales. And then, so that's the first stage just in the training, because you're absolutely right. It's like, you have to just sit down. I mean, when we've got this thing of like the number of different people at the table when we're selling, I might have finance, I might have sales, I might have rev ops, and I'll have a comp admin for the ICM part. Each one of them's got, I mean, it's classic persona marketing. We all know this, but being able to turn to a CFO and say, look, there's, ASC 606 requirements on commission expense accounting. We handle that through the journal entries. And then I teach the reps. And then you can say, and if you want to know more, I can set up a call with our controller who will walk you through how we use it. It's that same thing with the drinking the own champagne thing. Each one of them, I did a demo recently for our forecasting tool where I was talking to the CEO of a client company. He's like, yeah, I know we've got a couple seats, but we haven't really looked at it. I said, do you want to see it? And I just flipped my laptop around. I run a sales team in Japan. So I'm using that tool because it helps me manage a team in Japan, and it actually helps me with the language barriers. No matter how well we translate and think we know another language, there's things that gets lost, but boy, I can see the numbers. And I walked him through that. I was like, oh, You demo your own software? I'm like, sure. Do you want me to open up and send? I'll show you the ICM. But I know that he doesn't want to see how to build a rule. He wants to see, did a contest work? If you did an end of month contest, did it actually result in more business and we're pulling business forward, or did you just give away money? I always say that's the problem with contests. Half the time you just give away money to deals that were already going to happen. They accomplish nothing. So the measurements on that. But one of my favorite things to do is I'll grab my laptop and I go sit in the SDR pool. I mean, I will honestly grab an empty chair and I'll sit and I'll just listen to what the SDRs are saying on those first interactions as they're just trying to book a meeting. And what I will sometimes catch is oh, I know what list you're working off of. It was a webinar we did, but you have no idea what we talked about on that. Somehow a briefing didn't get to you or you didn't read it. So I have stood up in the middle of the SDRs. It's like, can we call a pause here? I'm going to give you 3 minutes on what this was again, because that's the other one. You have to remember, in marketing, sales is a customer of ours. And you don't always assume customers are going to read everything you send them, even in your own sales team. And sometimes hearing them and going, oh, that method didn't work. Let me find another method of communicating. Is it on Slack? Is it on email? Is it on a whiteboard? I once had a couple of attorneys, friends of mine, actually serve papers to a sales manager. And when he opened it up, it was all the materials that he kept on saying, I still haven't seen it, even though he'd received it through 3 different channels. He's still angry at me about that, but it was a beautiful play because I was just tired of him telling he didn't get it. It was a stack of hard copies of the documents and a USB drive.
And I love it when that's actually a two-way street. So I love bringing all the BDRs together and being like, what is the question you're scared of on that first call? Because that helps me figure out what we need to be talking about out there in the wild. So thank you so much for all of your sharing today. I think the other thing that goes unsaid here is that an important part of being a great evangelist is loving the product, loving the space, loving the audience that you work with. I really appreciate all of that. And I want to thank you for your time. And hopefully we're able to have some more coffee one of these days and talk about some more marketing stuff. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.